Yeah, I haven't been to one in years ago. I've been to one before. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. That sounds like but I've been going to the free beaches at Palatine Park for a couple of summers. Man, whoever got that grant and organized that stuff, something else. I mean, the band's great, the space is gorgeous, the sound man is great, the gear is good, free parking, you can drink beer, no one can do any shit about it. It's really nice.
I brought a couple extra just in case. Okay, would you like one? Your set? Just about time, if it's okay, we'll go ahead and get things in order to start, okay? Hello, folks. I'd like to thank everybody for being here with us today. At this time, we're going to be beginning the service here just momentarily, so I'll ask anybody with a cell phone or portable device to please make sure it's off or silenced for us. Thank you.
Hello, thank you all for being here, and thank you for those who are here with us virtually. Today we are gathered here to remember our father, Dr. Leonardo Golubovic. My name is Alex. I'm Leo's eldest daughter. We will begin the service with a video made by my sister Vita. I'll give you an account of my dad, who my dad was, as well as my eulogy. Vita will give hers, followed by Isaac. We will open the floor to anybody who would like to come up here and give a few words before I give my closing remarks. Take it away. said after physics 112 I wouldn't cry because of it anymore, so we're going to get through this all together. The universe is made of matter and energy. At the smallest level, matter is made of elementary particles, and on a large scale, the galaxy superclusters, and somewhere in between, we are fortunate to have it been arranged to be my dad. My grandmother, Bethel, would tell the story of my dad's birth. They had decided on a name, everything was squared away, when, during her labor, she had a vision that her child would be a great scientist. The planned name was scrapped, and he was named Leonardo after Leonardo da Vinci. Now, based on any Eastern European name you've ever heard, you can guess how common the name Leonardo was in Yugoslavia in the 1950s and 60s. The story would continue that he was teased, that he must think he's so smart and so good at science with a name like that. But it turned out my grandmother was right. My dad really loved science, and when he was younger, he wanted to be an astronaut. However, he said when he watched the space race in the 1960s, he was so interested in how the rocket moved and what propelled it, that it led him to wanting to be a physicist. Like every father worried that their kid was going to choose a degree that would lead them nowhere. Much like when I told my dad I wanted to study philosophy. My grandfather convinced him to get his undergraduate in electrical engineering, just in case he needed something to fall back on. My dad did, but it was only a stepping stone to physics. Before he could continue with his PhD, he would first need to complete his 2 years in the Yugoslavian army. And what may come as a surprise to no one, my father's fondness for drills and running was non-existent. After much negotiation, he was transferred from anti-aircraft artillery to the library, where he thrived until they found out one day that he was loaning out books to his friends without properly checking them out. He told us how, as a punishment, he was sent back to anti-aircraft for the remaining few months, but his life was already moved to a different base. And he was left in the barracks alone to sit around and read. After this, he was back on track and received his PhD in 1987, as well as an invitation to become a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Pennsylvania. Many people assume that my mom and dad came to the United States together, but that actually wasn't the case. They knew each other from high school. My mom would tell a story about how she had a little crush on him, and so one day she wore a braid in her hair to see if he would notice. He did. And my dad would then go on to tell her that she looked like his grandmother, if she had risen from the grave. This quickly squashed any chance of a romance between them. By happenstance, my mom also had moved to the United States around the same time as him, and through mutual friends found out the close proximity of each other. By this time, I assume my dad matured a little, and because the second time around, they would constantly call, write, and travel by train to see each other. One day when they were walking down the street, they saw a couple on a tandem bike with a sign that said "just married." My dad said, "We should do that." And my mom looked at him with disbelief and said, "Ride a bike?" And he said, "No, get married." And they were married 2 days after his birthday in 1988 in a small courthouse ceremony with a friend as a witness. Dina was born, and a few years later, Vita. One of my earliest memories with him was being so happy when he would pick me up from PCDC, the preschool downtown. At the time, Dairy Queen was in a small shack next to the dry cleaners, and I knew that if he had picked me up, there was a chance we would go there. We would walk down to the Dairy Queen, and we'd get 2 ice cream cones, vanilla with chocolate dip, and sit by the dry cleaners, and people watch us eat. He made our childhood so fun. Instead of playing monkey in the middle, we would play a game called volley, where he would throw the ball to one of us while the other had to intercept the ball with another ball. I guess my dad just learned something in the army. My interest in astronomy and stargazing stems from my dad. We would get the astronomy newsletter every year when I was little, and we would attend the Christmas planetarium show, and still brings me a lot of comfort in the winter when I look up and see Orion filled. He was so incredibly supportive of me when I went to college, tutoring me in most of my classes the first few years. I had always associated him with physics, And it really blew my mind how well versed he was in calculus, thermodynamics, fluidics, and chemistry, even topics he hadn't seen in years he could help me with. Newton's first law states that every object will remain at rest unless compelled to change its state by an action of an external force. In one case, this object was my dad, and the external force was me waking up 15 minutes before my chemistry final to find out I had overslept. My dad is usually one to take a few hours in the morning to wake up and get ready, but if you were in downtown that morning, you would have seen a PT Cruiser flying down Spruce Street and hit the front of the old police station so hard. The first 2 tires came back on the way back home. While in school, it made me so proud to say that my name was Leonardo Golubovic, and that people instantly knew my dad and had only good things to say about him. He was my dad, but to so many people told Vita and me that he was their science dad, and it made me so happy to know how big of an impact his involvement in others' lives was. A question I receive when I tell people we lost our mom is, how did your dad do as a parent after his heart attack? I think there's an assumption because he worked so hard, he was never around. But my dad stepped up and tried to be 2 parents for us. He attended soccer games, graduations, helped with homework, he cooked, cleaned, did late night Walmart runs. He sat and watched rom-coms and sci-fi shows with us, was very opinionated on The Bachelor, and was there when we needed him most. If I came home from a friend's house, he was up and ready to listen to whatever gossip I had. He knew what my friends were up to, what asked how they were doing, and genuinely cared about their well-being. And when I look at how good my dad was, how good of a person my dad was, I look at the relationship with my sister. One look at them and you would know that they were best friends. When we lost our mom, I watched her become her strongest support system and never faltered to be there for her. Newton's second law states in order to move, an object needs force, whether it's a push or a pull. My dad was that force in my life. There's a phrase my family would say when I was growing up, "Asa tata, tata asa." It roughly translates to, if dad does, as does Alex. When I moved to California, a lot of people would ask me if I was scared or if I was worried about being that far away. And I always tell them that it wasn't because my dad was able to do it. When I moved there and began my life there, I was so excited to go to have similar adventures as my parents, being in the same places they did, and being able to see why they loved living in Southern California so much. But I do believe my mom and dad did have rose-colored glasses when it came to LA traffic. They meant so much to be there. Even when she was in graduate school, the only school I went to be accepted at was UCLA, because that's where he had worked when they moved there. When I was accepted, I was so excited to tell him, because I knew what it meant to him. And I was excited to visit the campus and walk through the buildings where he had worked. Newton's third law says that a force doesn't act in isolation. There's always accompanied by another force that pushes or pulls in the opposite direction. Living far away had its disadvantages. Visiting became more difficult, time zones made calling harder, but it's easy to, when you think you have time to make excuses. His kidney function failing also made it hard to talk. Suddenly trips home went from visiting Cooper's Rock to suddenly trips to the hospital. Oh. Hanging out in the living room became him needing to rest after dialysis, and phone updates became GFR counts. What was suddenly endless time became borrowed time. But my dad was also so incredibly strong. He was strong when he pursued his dreams, strong when he raised us, and strong when he fought through his kidney failure. He fought to regain his health, asking, what can I do? What are the next steps to keep moving forward? And the strength he showed us growing up can be seen in my sister and how instrumental she was in his well-being in the last 6 years. She was there with him for doctor's visits, the transplant, post-transplant, and the care that he needed. She was there for him at the physical rehabilitation center. Vita was his biggest advocate and fought for him every step of the way. She would always have a positive attitude and help him see the light even when it didn't feel like it could ever be better. The law of relativity tells us, we're so proud of that calendar. The law of relativity tells us that how time passes depends on your frame of reference. When you're young, 65 feels ancient, but as you get older, you realize how young it really is. You have completed so much in a short period of time, and you deserve to be able to enjoy your retirement, sip on margaritas, and visit Serbia again. We'll gone much, much too soon. I like to think he left knowing how much we loved him and how much of a positive impact he has made on all of us. Because of him, we grew up to pursue our dreams, to go where it scares us, and to question everything. He taught us not only calculus, but how to treat others, to be supportive and caring, to be present focused, and to be a good friend. And now, Eva.
Sorry, I'm not great at public speaking. I also want to apologize in advance because this is just a jumble of memories. From my dad, I received unconditional love, and I saw him give unconditional love to my mom, my sister, and my friends. After my mom's stroke, when I entered my angry teen years, he was always there for me. He didn't resent me for my anger. He did all he could to make me happy. I can't count how many car years because when I was sad, him willingly listening to my sappy music and me crying in the passenger seat next to him. He liked Taylor Swift's music before it was cool for all of us. His favorite song by her was Love Story. When I struggled through every single math, physics, and engineering course in undergrad, he spent hours tutoring me patiently until I understood each concept. How lucky was I to have my own personal professor for a father. To be honest, I'm not sure how I'm going to finish my master's degree without him. I took Physics 112 with my dad in the summer of 2015. He started each new lecture with a little history lesson about the physicist or mathematician who discovered the equations, theories, and theorems. I loved studying this class. He was an incredible teacher and I learned so much. I worked earnestly to get a high grade in this class, and I wish I could put to words how much it meant to both me and him that I could have him as a professor. When I was 18, I got a speeding ticket during the senior trip. In my nervousness, I couldn't find my license and had to return 1 month later for a court date. I tried so hard to hide the ticket and planned to save money so that I could go back down to North Carolina and handle it myself. But then one day I walked through the kitchen and my dad asked me why I was receiving a bunch of letters from lawyers in North Carolina. Turns out traffic violations are publicly shared. So I spilled everything to him, explained the sudden drop in the speed limit from 70 to 55. So I'd been going 26 miles per hour with speed limit. And he said he'd go down to the courthouse with me. He wasn't even mad. He even suggested we go to Virginia Beach after and turn it into a little trip. After we paid off my ticket, we stayed in a hotel near the beach, swam in the pool in the ocean. As long as I've known my dad, he absolutely loved taking us to swim in hotel pool. During that trip to Virginia Beach, my dad bought me 2 little water dogs that I managed to keep alive for about 6 months. We took a boat trip to watch dolphins, my favorite animal from the ages of 7 to 21. We spent 3 days at the beach, and on the 3rd day, we decided we weren't ready to end our fun and extended it to a full-day trip. I was truly blessed to have a dad who loved a degenerate like me. My dad was my mom's biggest supporter with art. He helped her frame her paintings, attended all of her exhibitions. Probably the second to this. He was proud of the way she incorporated her understanding of math with her love of art, and he made sure that her paintings were beautifully displayed in our home. Although my memory of my mom was short-lived, I know she provided the same support to them. I was 12 the first time I saw my dad cry. After after my mom's stroke when we were finally able to see her in the ICU. I thought he was laughing at first, the sound was so foreign to me. He lost his father, my dead Michael, that same summer, and I didn't understand until adulthood how hard that must have been for him. He was without a wife, without both parents, and without siblings. And suddenly, he had to take on raising two teenage girls all alone. And to the friends and extended family who helped him through it, he was so grateful. Shout out to Lynn. While my mom was in the nursing home up in Pennsylvania, my dad visited her every single week without fail. Played her favorite music and spent hours doing any physical therapy he could for her. The love my dad showed for my mother, even after 5 years of her saying no words, showing no parts of hope that she was recovering, that was a once-in-a-lifetime type of love. Because love for my mom taught me the kind of love I deserve from a partner. My dad treated my close friends like family. He took us out to dinner, to movies, to Cooper's Rock, to Hyde Rock City, and gazed out over the overlook. As Alex in his obituary stated, he was always willing to drive the whole study group home from the library, no matter how late. My friends spoke candidly with him. They later told me how much they loved his accent, how interesting their conversations with him were. When my friends would visit our home, my dad would happily make us all dinner, even if it was just pan-baked frozen fish fillets. In 2016, my dad was diagnosed with end-stage renal failure and placed on the renal transplant list. By this time, my sister was living in California, and it was just me and him. We went to doctor's appointments together, got to know the dialysis clinic where he'd be receiving his treatment, and worked as hard as we could to keep his health on track. For my geology capstone in the summer of 2017, I went out to field camp for 5 weeks. One evening while I was in South Dakota, he and I were speaking on the phone, and I expressed anxiety I was having about death, its finality, the nothing that I worried would follow. In response, my dad told me, "We're just borrowing our bodies. In the end, they belong to the earth." Those words resonated greatly with me, and I found a lot of comfort in his wisdom. I moved to Northern Virginia in 2017, and my dad helped in every way he could to facilitate that transition. By then, it was hard for him to make long drives. I often wonder if I made the right choice to move that far away. In January 2020, my dad received a kidney transplant from a deceased donor, and we were all so excited for the chance of a fresh start with my dad's health. Just days after his transplant, COVID-19 was hitting the news worldwide for its outbreak in China, and I was terrified. But, thanks to my dad's transplant, I was able to take FMLA leave and see him every other week. By March, I was wearing 3 masks around his house. Overheating because my dad likes keeping the thermostat at a crisp 90 degrees. Each goodbye was harder than the last, and my dad always tried to convince me to stay just a few days longer. I was still early in my career, and I was afraid to make any decisions that would risk my relationship with my employer, but now I wish I would have. After years of trying to convince my dad to retire and move in with me, he finally agreed in the summer of 2021. We packed him and his thousands of favors up and moved into a 3-bedroom apartment in Virginia. After we settled into our apartment, our favorite TV show to watch together was Schitt's Creek. He enjoyed it so much, he looked at the entire cast online, talked to me about their familial relations, and told me about each actor's career in the film industry. I was excited to have my dad live with me, excited to help him improve his health, and excited because it seemed like COVID was finally on the decline. However, right after Christmas that year, my throat began itching, but my dad and I caught COVID. He managed to recover, but his health returned to the worst in the months following. We tried to do everything we could, but it just wasn't enough. I really wanted to care for my dad the way he cared for me. And I regret that I couldn't. In the last few years of his life were marked with many health difficulties, but through it all, he maintained his sense of humor, his love and loyalty to his family, and passion for physics. Looking through the lifetime of memories, preserving old photos and videos was way harder than I ever thought it would be. Alex and I were two little girls absolutely obsessed with our father. My dad was so filled with life, so filled with hope, and so invested in making notable contributions to the business community. His contributions never seemed to come from a selfish place. He never seemed interested in accolades or fame. He just wanted science to be shared and appreciated. My dad was my tutor, my confidant, the person I went to when I was happy, sad, angry, or some emotion in between. And the grief that we've all felt since his passing, I try to remind myself of what he told me while I spent my summer at field camp. We're just borrowing our bodies. In the end, they belong to the earth.
Thank you all for coming to help us celebrate Leo's life this evening. My name is Isaac, and I'm one of the two mere sons-in-law alluded to in Leo's obituary. Vita and I began dating about 5 years ago after we finished our 5-week-long capstone course for geology out in South Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming. Once back in Morgantown, I met Leo the way most of you here tonight probably remember him, walking down High Street on his way from the university back to their home in South Park. In just a few short minutes, it was easy to see that their interaction, that Vita had not just introduced me to her father, but also her best friend. As I began to spend more and more time with the Golubovics, either going on walks around Morgantown or enjoying a meal at Eaton Park, I observed Leo had no acquaintances, only conversations, but hundreds of them. And once the conversation had been engaged, a friendship was born. But now I'm going to let you know a little something about myself. I'm terrible at physics. Luckily, Leo's wealth of knowledge included a vast array of subjects, one of those being history. After occasional nights down on High Street, Vita and I would return home to find Leo wide awake, as he was a night owl. He and I would talk about the fall of Constantinople, the rise of the Ottoman Empire, the outbreak of World War I. There really was no topic outside of his expertise. I came to really appreciate these one-on-one talks with Leo. They continued throughout the years. When the pandemic hit, it made trips to Morgantown hard for me. Vita was able to visit every other weekend, but I often had to stay behind in Virginia to care for Paco, Lily, and Luna. On weekends when I could make it to visit, Vita had implemented a strict triple-mask policy while we were in the house with Leo. And this would not have been so terrible, except as Vita mentioned, Leo usually kept the thermostat set at a nice, cool 90 degrees. And any groceries that were brought into the house went through a complete sterilization process that made any hospital proud. As the pandemic continued into year 2, and Leo had to begin using an oxygen concentrator, Vita and I began discussing Leo's move to Virginia with us. This began one of the largest endeavors mankind has ever tackled, emptying the 108 house. Closets where you might expect coats or vacuums to be stored. You would find publications from the American Physical Society dating back to the early 2000s, WVU faculty books from the 1990s, and countless family photo albums. The moving process was like going through a time capsule that showed both how dedicated Leo was to his family and his work as a physicist. He would be able to tell you the importance of every photo and every document as he brought them before him. So if you're a former student of this year's tonight, you probably have your homework scrolled away or right now. And as it be, the forces of the universe must have wanted Leo to feel at home in our new apartment. Because during move-in weekend, the AC unit had quit working in the August heat, and it read 95 degrees outside. But I enjoyed life with our new roommate. I would cook dinner after work, and the three of us would sit down and watch TV in the evening. And Leo discovered his favorite show, Schitt's Creek, this way. And after Leo caught COVID this last Christmas, his health began to steadily decline. However, this did not stop our history talks. We would spend evenings sitting in his room, discussing the role of Mehmed II, or he'd be giving me a lesson about some obscure Serbian history. These talks even continued at his rehabilitation facilities. He would be tired after a day of dialysis and physical therapy, but he could still pull dates and events from his memory of these. At the end, he still showed so much love for Vita, Alex, the pets, and me. Each day was harder than the last, but I was so thankful to have those days with Leo. I will greatly miss our walks and our talks together. I'd like to close with a quote from Albert Einstein that I feel summarizes how Leo lived his life of a father, a friend, and an educator. Our death is not the end. We can live on in our children and the younger generation, for they are us. Our bodies only wilted leaves on the tree of life. Thank you.
And now I'd like to open the microphone to anybody who would like to speak, if you're interested. So in physics, we're going to go more into this. The law of conservation of energy states that the total state of energy of an isolated system remains constant. Many know this to be that energy can be neither created nor destroyed, but rather it is only transformed or transferred from one form to another. My dad is physically gone from us. I like to think his energy is not disappeared, but is simply transferred. His energy had an impact on us all. We are fortunate to have known him as a loving and caring father, a compassionate professor and researcher, a loyal colleague, a shoulder to cry on, and a friend to celebrate with. In a short history of nearly everything, Bill Bryson says, all things are made of atoms. They are everywhere and they constitute everything. Look around you, it's all atoms. Not just the solid things like the walls and tables and sofas, but the area between. And they are in numbers you cannot conceive. They're so fantastically durable because they're so long-lived. Atoms really get around. Every atom you possess has almost certainly passed through several stars and has been a part of millions of organisms on its way to becoming you. We're each so atomically numerous and so vigorously recycled at death that a significant number of our atoms, up to 1 billion for each of us, it has been suggested, probably once belonged to Shakespeare. 1 billion more each came from Buddha and Genghis Khan and Beethoven, and any other historical figure you care to name. So, we are all reincarnations, though short-lived ones. When we die, our atoms will disassemble and move off and find new uses elsewhere, as part of a leaf or other human being or a drop of dew. Atoms themselves, however, can go on practically forever. So we'd like to thank you all for being and joining with us today, and the love and care you showed our family. And thank you so much. We also like to add that throughout the pandemic, something that has really helped our father was Meals on Wheels. It made it really hard for him to be able to go to the grocery store. And so having something to be able to bring him food was incredibly helpful. And so if there's any donations or charity that you're looking for, please consider Meals on Wheels. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our services here this evening. I just wanted to give a special thank you to the family for their kind words. It was a very nice service. And on behalf of the family, I want to thank you all for coming and showing your support. Thank you.
Saturdays, but not every day. I've got